Hey everybody, welcome to the next episode. You're going to see the fast way to load up your tank engine on a trailer.
This is Railroad Showcase.
The short-line holding company, GENESEE in Wyoming, just entered an agreement to be purchased by Brookfield Asset Management for $6.4 billion. G&W holds 120 short lines, 114 of which are in North America. The deal will close by the end of 2020, making G&W a privately held company, and requires the approval of G&W stockholders holding 66% of the outstanding common stock, as well as regulatory approval from several agencies. The deal is a great transaction for current stockholders, who gained nearly a 40% premium on their stock, the sale price jumping to $112 a share, next to the $80.28 it was the day before media speculation on the potential deal.
On June 1st of last year, the 416 wildfire started in Colorado, quickly becoming the sixth worst in the state's history. After a year-long investigation, the U.S. Forestry Service has found the Durango and Silverton at fault. Coal-burning engines are known for throwing still smoldering embers out the stack and have a history of causing fires. Despite spark arresters and many other measures to reduce the risk of fire, the U.S. Attorney's Office is suing the railroad for $25 million on behalf of the Forest Service for starting the fire. While no one was harmed due to the fire, thousands were evacuated and millions of dollars were spent to put it out. While some feel that the railroad needs to be held responsible for the fire, others suggest that putting that weight on the railroad might hinder it in supporting the community. The railroad brings in hundreds of thousands of people a year from all around the world, which majorly boosts the local economies.
On June 28th, 40 cars derailed in the St. Clair River Tunnel between Michigan and Canada. One of the cars ruptured, spilling its contents, 14,000 gallons of sulfuric acid. Fortunately, there's no threat to public safety, and the acid has all been contained to the site. Immediately, Canadian National had crews as well as third-party contractors on site pumping out the chemical and starting the cleanup work. Air monitoring stations were set up at several locations, with no contaminants found outside the tunnel. Cleanup was finished just a few days ago.
2 Texas teenagers were recently arrested for train hopping in Sandusky, Ohio. Officers noted 2 persons moving around a car and went to investigate. Upon seeing the officers, the 2 teens made a brief run for it before being caught. When asked what they were doing upon the train, they freely admitted to using the railroads to travel the country.
This news item over many other news items, or actually many other pieces on the internet that show train hopping, train riding, hoboing, because we wanted to underscore the fact that this is illegal.
Yes.
And it's really dangerous. There's a whole genre of YouTube videos out there about hobos, modern-day hobos, that are hopping modern-day freight trains and going from point A to point B. One of the most famous guys has now been enshrined in his fame because he got taken out by an Amtrak train. He was trespassing on railroad property. He was riding a train he shouldn't have been on. I don't know if he was getting on or getting off, but an Amtrak train was coming by on an adjacent track, and his illegal hoboing hobby cost him his life. And so most of us who are railroad historians have watched the movies and read the articles about that era during the Depression where thousands of men made their way around, and a lot of railroad workers turned a blind eye because they knew times were tough. Nowadays, you shouldn't be hopping freight trains. We are not in the Depression. Most of the people who are doing it for a thrill. They're doing it not because the economy is turned inside out and they simply can't find a job anywhere, or they're doing it to get to their next job. Most of these people either do it as a pastime on the weekends, or they're not working because they choose not to work, and this is their fun and their source of transportation. It's a chosen way of life. The official stand of the Railroad Showcase is that modern-day hoboing is not only illegal, but it's foolish and it's potentially deadly. The railroads are not what they were back in the 30s. They travel faster, and the yards are more dangerous.
For our first piece this week, this isn't really one of our favorite finds again. It's more of a silver lining piece. So in February, the Gravesend Model Marine and Engineering Society unfortunately suffered the loss of 4 of their engines when they were burglared in the middle of the night. BLOOMBERG made a nice video about the club, the burglary, and the heartwarming response from the community. The engines were stored in secured shipping containers and were all put away for the night. Parking in a field next to the club, the burglars cut one fence and hopped a small embankment to get to the containers. After cutting a hole in the back of one to inspect its contents, they made quick work of grinding the hinges off the door, using the hefty lock, which was supposed to prevent these sorts of incidents, as a hinge. Presumably using a nearby wheelbarrow, they moved the 4 engines, 2 private and 2 club-owned, to their van. The following morning, before the news was out, the thieves tried to sell the engines to a model railroad shop, but fled as soon as they were asked for paperwork on the boilers, which is required for all engines. While they haven't had any word of the engines since then, the support from the community has been encouraging. They even set up a crowdfunding site for the club, and incoming donations of over £5,000 has helped the club recover.
Okay, so this one is genuinely a favorite find. I saw this a few years ago, and I am astonished by this video. It was taken by Gabriel Habermann, and it shows a Romanian narrow-gauge tank engine running up on a ramp and loading onto a semi-trailer under its own steam. This is astonishing. The incredible level of skill on the part of the crew is just breathtaking, and not a little bit, because it is really dangerous.
And look at this guy. He's manually sanding the rails on that ramp. Look at how steep that is.
You know, and I want to know if they ran the water all the way to the top nut on the glass. I mean, did they drop the fire before they did this? I can't imagine that at least some of the crown sheet didn't get exposed while they were going up that ramp.
This video was shot about 10 years ago, and we couldn't find too many details about the operation, but we think one company had 2 unconnected sections of track that were being worked by this one engine. So these guys were good at this because they had regular practice.
You know, it's every trailer has a load rating, and I can't help but wonder how much beyond the load rating of that trailer that tank engine is. If you have any more details to share about this operation, leave it in the comments. Now we're going to mix up our modes of transportation a little bit. Let's take a look at Cruising the Cut, a YouTube channel produced by David Johns, a former television news reporter in England. In episode 179, he gives us a brief glimpse of the battlefield line in the Midlands, about halfway between Birmingham and Nottingham.
Yes, the sun had definitely disappeared by this point. But it wasn't raining, and just here I had the absolute pleasure, by luck more than judgment, of hearing this. It's the Battlefield Line heritage steam train running alongside the canal, which I just managed to get a shot of. Later, moored in Market Bosworth again, I took this phone footage of it at the station.
I am absolutely enamored with the canal system in Britain. In the last half of the 1700s and all through the 1800s, they developed an incredibly complex network of canals that crisscrossed nearly the whole island. The first half of the 20th century saw almost the entire network fall out of use, and a lot of the canals simply went dry. Then in the 60s, a resurgence began, and a lot of the canals were restored, and they're still restoring some of the old canals and even digging a few new ones. It's become a really popular form of recreation and even as a lifestyle. So much like RVs in America, you can rent canal boats for a vacation. You can own your own canal boat and use it on the weekends, or you can sell your house and live on one, like David has done. The difference is that on a canal boat, you go 3 miles an hour. If it looks interesting to you and you like programming with a calmer pace, you'll really enjoy Cruising the Cut. I am an unapologetic Anglophile, and it is one of my life goals to enjoy the English countryside by renting one of those canal boats for a month and cruising through it at 3 miles an hour.
Hung back a fraction, let them out, and then I could take my turn.
Next, we combine our love of trains with our love of vintage Disney.
Look at this! Oh my gosh. Do you know what this is?
The YouTube channel Justin Scarred visited a half-size replica of the mine train through nature's wonderland that ran from the 1950s to the mid-70s. This 15-inch gauge backyard railroad was built by Bill Iwin and runs around his house near Sacramento.
Look at that! The original attraction took you through Bear Country, Beaver Valley, the Living Desert, and of course the Rainbow Caverns. For just over 20 years in its various forms, it delighted visitors from all over with all kinds of animatronic animals and different scenes created by Disney. Almost like an Old West version of the Jungle Cruise, in a way. Until it was replaced in 1977 by Big Thunder Mountain.
At first, I was inclined to be somewhat critical of the drivers and of the running gear. But one has to remember, this is a replica of an amusement ride, not a historic train.
Across their driveway! Dude, did you see that?
Non-traditional parts and materials could be used since this engine doesn't run on steam. We tried to figure out what the motive power was. Maybe a viewer knows? Is it electric, internal combustion? Leave a comment and let us know.
Check out. So when I heard about this, it was like my dream to come and see it. So imagine my surprise when I learned that the builder of the half-scale mine train was none other than Bill Iwan, who happens to be the father of my friend Brett Iwan. This is a weird, small world situation. This is unbelievable. This is the stuff I love the most. This was all hand-built by Bill and some friends in his garage.
So there are a lot of ways that you can get a derailed car back on the tracks. If it's really severe, you might have to resort to jacks or cribbing or heavy equipment. Back in the day, they used a crane that they called the big hook. But railroaders know that the fastest way to get a car back on the tracks, if it's going to work, is with re-railing frogs. This video by Silvio Dilhe shows just how quick it can be if it's done right. Notice that both wheels are off the rail and they use two frogs side by side, one on each track.
We've mentioned in previous episodes how trains make everything better, including video games. And there's a new game out this year called Satisfactory. The basic premise being that you're an engineer dropped on an alien planet, and you need to use the planet's resources to build factory systems and automated processes to get your product. For their second update, they added trains. Of course, they're futuristic space trains, but they're trains nonetheless, with track, switches, stations, and even provisions for intermodal cargo. This might be the closest one can get to real railroading in a non-simulation game.
You know, I'm not real big on video games anymore, but I actually like to see the inclusion of railroads in these video games because it just shows that it's still in the public consciousness. It's still something that people are aware of, and, you know, that can't be a bad thing.
All right, that's it for episode 26. As always, thank you guys for being here. You are our biggest supporters, and we can't tell you how much we appreciate that.
We are grateful that you're here on this journey with us. And remember, keep your hand on the throttle and your eye on the rail.